we're gonna have to live with these stupid people. What's up? It's wash day for my hair, and I have been so anxious that I have bitten several holes in my lip. Let's go. I want to talk a little bit today about the apocalypse. I'm going to use something as a jumping off point, and I hope that that doesn't turn you off, because I want to talk just a little teeny tiny bit about The Last of Us and just kind of use that as a springboard to talk about, like, how do we live with each other in this potential future where things start to really fall apart, and specifically on the axis of being gay or being trans, I guess, is kind of a secondary thing. So minor spoilers for The Last of Us. I promise I'm not going to give anything away crazy, but you know, if you feel the need to skip past this intro to get to the meat, then go for it, whatever. Basically, one of the characters is a lesbian in this post-apocalyptic world where, like, the zombies happened. HBO doesn't like when you call them zombies, but I'm going to do it anyway. So the zombies come on and they destroy everything and society collapses, okay? We've talked about The Last of Us before because there is a settlement, a group of people who are basically building a town that is fortified and protected. And where it basically, like, even in the context of the show, they explicitly say this is a commune. We split up the work. We assign these tasks and everything, where everybody's very community minded in this place. And something that they touched on in the very first 2 episodes of season 2. So just for your context, like, if you haven't watched the first 2 episodes of season 2, this is going to be a minor part of that. But in the first episode, Ellie, the lesbian, she has a romantic encounter with another woman in a public place. And there is a guy in the scene, an old man, who gets mad about it. And he uses the slur, the D word, for lesbians. I don't want to get into that whole scene or whatever. But so this has me thinking, like, yeah, okay, so this is a small community of people who are heavily reliant on one another for, like, literally surviving. And I've talked about it in my previous video. It also seems like just like it's a good place to live. Like, they have community events. They have children running around playing. They screen movies. They have events for holidays where, like, you're kind of expected to show up. And it's, of course, it's a tiny little commune with only a few hundred-ish people. And so there's like that small town vibe of, like, everybody knows everybody, right? But of course, in the commune, where outside of that context there are a bunch of fucking zombies, the need to cooperate is dramatically increased, right? And it is not possible to leave, realistically speaking. Like, it's not safe to leave for anybody, to leave the confines of the, except on patrol or whatever, blah, blah, blah. I do think that the show takes on kind of a ridiculously optimistic spin about this. I mean, I think that the show is trying to make a statement, obviously, that, like, the show is pro-gay. Okay, so this guy says something homophobic, and the next day, there's like a council that has been elected, and there's like a group that is the leaders. And one of the leaders is like, I think you have something to say, sir. Like, clearly having had a conversation with him previously to this thing that's happening on screen. And he apologizes. He says, I shouldn't have said it. I shouldn't have even thought it. I'm going to apologize and do a nice gesture. So I just have some mixed feelings about this, you know, that the show, I think, is just trying to be like, yes, even in the post-apocalypse, we can be pro-gay. What would have happened if you didn't have a council member on your side? What would happen if your father figure wasn't there to, like, physically confront someone who says something fucked up to you? So it is, like, really optimistic in that way. And it just has me churning on how will we be able to live? And so, for if everybody's frame of reference, if you are not familiar with me, my channel, and when I have talked about this in the past, we are, even before all of the insane shit that's happening right now, we are already on track for economic collapse, at least in the United States. Our economy is basically going to be screwed over pretty massively by climate change and all this other stuff where we're like prioritizing profits over people. The Limits to Growth report from 1972, if you would like to read more, is kind of where I'm getting this from. That, you predicted 50 years ago that if we do XYZ, here are some different things that could happen. Like if we prioritize climate and human well-being, here's what could happen to the economy in 50, 100 years. If we do the worst things that we could possibly do, we will end up in economic collapse. So that's the timeline that we're on. The research has been revisited a couple times, and now we're here in the world of RFK Jr. trying to create a registry of autistic people and shut down all public disease prevention stuff. The administration is saying that COVID was made in a Chinese lab, but also that we shouldn't do anything to mitigate its spread. And then, all this very obvious kind of pumping and dumping of the stock market and like this sharp, steep decline in the stock market and frankly, a decline in like faith in the institution of the economy. Like, I don't really know what is the correct way to say what I'm trying to say there. But basically, we are witnessing kind of an economic free fall. Prices are going to continue to rise with all the tariffs, and there is no domestic manufacturing to replace the stuff that we need to get from places like China. Basically, like, all of this, probably. So, yeah, like, we are accelerating toward some kind of collapse. I moved myself to the Pacific Northwest, and I expect that largely things are going to be pretty chill here, but there are Proud Boys who walk around in Portland. Like, there are white supremacists, there are, people with their guns and all this. And like, what are we going to do if things continue the way that they're going, which will lead to economic collapse, potentially more and more diseases, not necessarily turning people into zombies, but certainly diseases that are negatively impacting population, that make other people dangerous in a real tangible sense. Like, if we let a sick person in to our city or our town or our commune, it could very seriously damage our rate of survival. And part of that Limits to Growth report is a prediction that if we continue on the way we are now, that the global population will dip down to like 2 billion again. So I don't know that you're really capable of imagining what it would look like to go from almost 8 billion people down to 2 billion people, and that we're still going to be spread out across the globe. But like, what are some ways that we can bulwark ourselves against things like homophobia and transphobia and misogyny? Because people are still going to be hateful. There's still going to be sexual assault. There's still going to be all this nonsense. And I think a lot of us probably struggle in the current situation with this feeling of like, how can we live in the world with these people? Like, I can't exist it's the paradox of tolerance, if you're familiar with that, you can't tolerate everybody. Because if you tolerate women and rapists in the same space, then you will just end up in a space where there's only rapists and no women, for example. Or, give it the homophobia spin. Like, either you are intolerant of homophobia and people who are homophobic, or you will just end up in a place where gay people like leave because they're not safe. That's the paradox of tolerance, that for the social cohesion, the social contract, you can't allow intolerant people, or you have to at least say that it's not acceptable for you to be openly like that. I do kind of wish that we had gotten a little bit of a scene where the council member speaks to this homophobic guy, how do you convince someone to not be homophobic? Like, if somebody says that to you, whether they're drunk or whatever, if they're like mad, you're like, how can you be doing gay shit in front of kids, you F word, you know, like it's you probably aren't gonna like fundamentally change that person's heart in one conversation. But what you can do is say, look, you believe what you believe and nobody can take that away from you, but it's life or death out here. And you can't be acting like that to people. Keep your mouth to yourself, keep your thoughts private, because there's like 300 of us here in this compound trying to support each other, trying to distribute the labor, not just trying to survive, but trying to live a good life and trying to, you know, be a refuge for people who are fleeing hardship. And, you know, you can strip away the veneer of the zombies and just look at it in terms of like, there are raiders, there are rapers, there are people who wish you ill. And like, there are gonna be people, if a complete societal collapse happens, there are gonna be people who like round up black folks to be their slaves. Like, you know, people in some places are so desperate to return to an order where, you know, white men are the dominant group, and they are still, to be completely clear. Like, just look at the party of identity politics, the Republicans. You know, they very clearly are still in charge. But yeah, like there's going to be all this really jacked up stuff that happens potentially in a future where like the economy collapses and the United States kind of disintegrates in a federal sense. And then like you'll have all these kind of member states. This is my prediction. I don't know what's going to actually happen, but my prediction is like, if the United States economy tanks, you'll still have California with its like very, very large GDP, considering that it's just a state in the United States. And it will have some internal stability because of that. That's my prediction. So you'll end up with these like areas where the economy is doing well and there are enough people who are community minded enough to work together on things. But what does that mean for gay people in Alabama if this all falls apart? You know, you can hope that they have places like Jackson in the show to go to. And like, I guess that's part of what I want to help build here in the Pacific Northwest is like, I want to have that stability long term. I want to produce food. I want to be in a cooperative environment. I want to be responsible stewards of the land and all of the, you know, plants and animals that are on it. And I think that we should focus on helping each other. What does it mean when you have a homophobe in your city, compound, commune, whatever it is, town? And I think that this is a question that we have to deal with even now of, I think so many of us, especially if you're here listening to me on YouTube, you probably primarily interface with politics via the internet. And you probably primarily are familiar with building community in a way that is on the internet, right? Where we have all these purity tests and we bicker about bi lesbians and whether non-binary people are trans-misogynist for creating gender ambiguous representations of non-binary people that trigger people's trans feminine stereotype shit. Anyway, that was a very specific discourse that I will not rehash here. But you see my point here is that we are so accustomed in that sense to having this like purity testing and bickering and like, you know, just like stupid shit. But then if you actually go out and you actually start attending protests or you know, volunteer for something, you know, especially if you're volunteering to like help homeless people. I would love to get into homeless outreach. And there's a person who regularly just yells the N-word in a certain part of town that I go to sometimes. So like you'll have to deal with people who are hateful or unstable or some combination thereof. And so like figuring out now how to deal with those problems is probably a good idea because we are looking into a future where we might not have employment protections, for example. Of course, there are kind of limited ways to address hate speech and hate crimes anyway, especially when you're in like a situation where they're trying to redefine which groups can be hate crimed, etc. So like, yeah, what do we do if there's no police, if there's no court to sue someone, if there's no like accountability mechanism? As people who are part of the marginalized group, we will have to figure out how we're going to respond to that. And unfortunately, we do in that situation have to depend on either a majority rule and fucking pray that these people aren't like majority homophobic, majority want to drag you behind the car until you die. Or do you ingratiate yourself with leadership? Do you become leadership in that context? I guess I am kind of asking a lot of questions that I don't have the answers to right now because things are just unpredictable. But like, yeah, this is something to consider. We are going to have to live with these dumb fucking people. And we're going to have to use advanced level communication skills, advanced level de-escalation skills. So maybe that's like the thing to do now. It's like, first of all, ingratiate yourself in your local community, become a valued member so that they can see, hey, gay people and trans people work hard. They step up when it's needed. They offer things and care for their neighbors and stuff. Like, become that neighbor who's like, the kids in your neighborhood, they feel safe around you, helping out your neighbor who is just moving in or just moving out. Fucking whatever, like whatever thing you need to do. First of all, ingratiate yourself in your community, but also, and possibly more importantly, learn those skills of communication, de-escalation, and your own emotional regulation skills, as well as probably some basic psychological conditioning skills. Like, how can we communicate with people who are not interested in listening to us? How can we live in a way where it's like we can have separate beliefs and ideas and like draw lines around what is acceptable to do, right? Because like in this situation of like the homophobic guy in the commune and like a young lesbian, like the conversation has to be like, look, I completely understand that you have this belief, right? I may not agree with it, but what's happening here is like you are being aggressive toward a member, an equal member, because that's the fucking point of a commune, an equal member of this community. And you're trying to be hateful and you're trying to start problems and all this. Like, whereas the gay person is just like having a relationship, finding like the dialectics of you can feel the way that you feel and also not interfere with them. So I don't know. I really like The Last of Us. I think it's asking some interesting questions. Again, I do think that particular thing is like, I don't know if they're going to keep touching on that in the future. Cause obviously I haven't played the games or anything. I'm only speaking to the TV show. But yeah, I am really interested in these questions, and perhaps some of you have some more insight into how we can live in this world with these people, whether it's now, whether it's in a future collapse. I guess that's kind of always been the problem with gay and trans people is, we're just trying to do our shit. We're just trying to live our lives, and people are mad at us for that. And that's what's so tiring and sad about it, I guess, is that all I want to do is I want to work a good job. I want to buy a house. I want to chill in the woods by myself with my husband and grow our own food and like live a full life. That's all I want. And like express myself the way that I want to express myself and have access to the medication and other healthcare that I need as a trans person. And that's clearly not okay to so many people, that there are people who are so violently opposed to me living a peaceful existence that they will strip me of legal protections, define me out of the law, and prepare to strip me of that healthcare that I need, potentially criminalize me as a sexual deviant who's harming children. And this is not exaggeration. This is the world that we live in now in America. So, yeah, obviously it's pretty bleak in some ways. I love Jackson in the TV show because it gives me something to aspire toward. It makes me feel like even if shit hits the fan, there will be some group of people who will figure it out. We will figure something out. Even if it's not perfect, even if it's not to everyone's satisfaction. In fact, the best compromises leave everybody a little sour. I want to make sure that I'm imparting in this video that this is aspirational, that it's hopeful, that I want to figure out how to live in a world with people who are like that and like maybe try to change their minds eventually or whatever. But like, I'm content with peaceful coexistence. I don't need you to believe I am the gender I say that I am. I don't really need you to like get it. I just need you to stop interfering so that we can work together on the basic, like, getting through the winter kind of stuff. So anyway, I just kind of wanted to get those thoughts out of my head. I'm getting annoyed with talking about current events politics. This is a little bit more tolerable to me to talk about it in this sense, especially because we're using fiction as a springboard. So yeah, stick around if you want to see more of me talking about movies and TV shows and the upcoming climate collapse and the, you know, kind of concurrent or subsequent economic collapse that we're going to be living through. Yeah. So I think that's pretty much it for today. Thank you very much for hanging out. See you next time.